Hello, good evening, everybody. And without any delay, I just this is the second ECG class, and today this class will be taken by Dr. Devapoto. Earlier, the class was basically with some basics as well as some of the bardiarrhythmias. He started to actually basically to create some kind of ground for you so that you can play in a better way. So today, this is one of the interesting aspect of the ECG, and not only ECG. I think the most interesting as well as very fascinating subject in the cardiology. Yeah, so that is the electrophysiology, arrhythmia. These are the one of the important aspect, and arrhythmia recognition is very important, as well as particularly the treatment of the arrhythmia after recognizing this. And I hope that Dr. Devaboto will, after that lecture, it will be much easier, and then there will be no problem at all. Okay, thank you, Dr. Devaboto. I am handing over the Dr. Devaboto for starting the session without delay. And I don't want to again reiterate that there is chat box, so whatever questions will be there, so you can put that questions. Okay, Devaboto, please.
Sure, sir. Thank you so much, sir. Thanks for your kind introduction. And the thing is, mostly I have kept it ECG based, but as you said, we'll try to cover some of the management strategy as well. But my motto of the presentation is from the ECG, what is the diagnosis, and from that, what will be the best treatment option for that patient. But I haven't gone to a very detail of the thing, but I'll try to cover for each patient what should be the possible this option, treatment option. So I cannot see the presentation. I think, I have to share. Oh, yeah. Just a minute. Yeah. Go to the first slide, please. Yes. So go to the, so the thing is, I have deliberately headlined it like SVT, looking for a different angle and where the diagnosis made a difference. Because from EP perspective, possibly we need to make a difference between each of the types of SVT. But from a cardiologist or medicine perspective, I don't find that you have to make a diagnosis of SVT in each and every cases. So I will try to emphasize where you need to differentiate between them and where you don't need to differentiate between them. So let's say majority of our patients will be like this. So they will have a regular tachycardia and they will have a narrow QRS complex, whatever you see in this ECG. Generally, we call them SVT when the heart rate is more than 100. But for all practical purposes, in most of the patients where we truly need to take care of the rhythm is above 130 or 150 beats per minute. Below that, generally they do not cause any pathological problem so that we have to deal with them. Let's say we can have a little slow sinus tachycardia of around 110, 120. Generally, they do not pose any problem. Sometimes atrial tachycardia can be very slow, let's say 120, 130, but they are very, very incessant. And because they are very, very incessant, that can cause a tachycardiomyopathy when they continue for days or weeks together. So most of the patient will be like this with a narrow QRS tachycardia. I will show you a couple of examples where we are dealing with a wide QRS tachycardia, but I haven't deliberately kept much of the wide QRS tachycardia in this lecture because we will possibly discuss them in a different section of lecture, so to make it a little simpler. So, but obviously today we will discuss some of the wide QRS tachycardia, which is practically important for us. So, what are the supraventricular tachycardia? The supraventricular tachycardia are atrial tachycardia. What does it mean? The atrial tachycardia originates within the atrium. So it doesn't have to involve the AV node. It doesn't have to involve the ventricle as a part of the circuit. Obviously, if there is a extra, can you see my cursor? I don't think you can see my cursor, right? You cannot see my cursor or any mouse pointer, right? Last day also you said?
No.
Okay.
Hello, Dr. Bera. Just to interrupt you, you can put the whiteboard on and
yes,
then
like
you can...
this. Okay.
You can mark. Yeah.
Okay, fine. Yeah. Last day also we did. So for atrial tachycardia, it do not need to involve the AV node or ventricle. So they can run without any involvement of the AV node and AV ventricle. In other words, in AV NRT, we'll go into the discussion in detail. It is actually originating within the AV node, and passively it involves the atrium by conduction from V to A, and it passively involves the ventricle. That is, it goes from AV node to ventricle. So AV nodal reentrant tachycardia actually can run without any participation from atrium, without any participation from ventricle. Coming to the third entity, which is called atrioventricular reentrant tachycardia. If we have a cardiac chamber here and AV node here, let's say we have a pathway on the left side. So generally what happens that there is a antegrade conduction from atrium to ventricle via AV node that travels in the ventricle and then goes back via that pathway to the atrium, and it keeps running round and round. So that produces the re-entry, which is called atrio. Atrio means atrium. Ventricular, this is V, re-entrant tachycardia. So this is one of the tachycardia among the supraventricular tachycardia which needs a obligatory participation of the ventricle. So among the three tachycardia which I just discussed, atrial tachycardia doesn't need active participation from ventricle. AV-NRT, that also doesn't need active participation from the ventricle. That means AV-NRT can go round and round here without any active participation of ventricular atrium. Atrial tachycardia can go round and round here. It doesn't need any active participation from ventricle. So in other words, if I put it in a different way, there is a tachycardia going on and you give a ventricular premature extra stimulus deliberately or spontaneously, and the tachycardia breaks. So if I give a ventricular extra stimulus from the right or left ventricle and it, okay, now I understood why it happened. So, and it terminates the tachycardia. Among these three, atrial tachycardia, AV-NRT and AV-RT, the most likely tachycardia is AV-RT because that is the only tachycardia which involves the ventricle as a part of circuit. Hope I am clear. If I am not, then I will possibly explain on this again. Coming to the other three tachycardia, atrial flutter, atrial fibrillation and sinus tachycardia. These three are also essentially originating in the right atrium or left atrium, and they also do not depend on AV node for sustaining the tachycardia. So these tachycardia can continue even with AV block. So among this, the only tachycardia which has AV node dependency, means it has to be AV node dependent, is AV nodal reentrant tachycardia, which has to run within the AV node, and AV-RT, where the antegrade conduction from atrium to ventricle has to pass through the AV node. So these two tachycardia, we call them AV node dependent tachycardia. That means if you block the AV node, like you give a vagal maneuver, you give adenosine, you give verapamil, the tachycardia will terminate. The other four tachycardia, whatever you see here, is atrial tachycardia, flutter, fibrillation and sinus tachycardia can go on even you block the AV node. Among the SVT, we can see that they can run with aberrancy. Aberrancy means the patient can have a transient bundle branch block like a RBBB or LBBB, and it can give rise to a white QRS morphology and can mimic ventricular tachycardia. This happens because the right bundle or the left bundle, yes, last time we discussed that after AV node, the electricity goes to his bundle, then bifurcates into two like right and left bundle. So one of the bundle can be little sluggish as compared to other. They may not be pathologically abnormal. They can be normal otherwise, but within the physiologic range, they can got a little delay. Generally, the right bundle is little more sluggish in most of the patients, so we more frequently get right bundle branch aberrancy. We will come to that if we have such a ECG. So, generally, what we need to differentiate in tachycardia is we obviously need to differentiate between VT and SVT. We may not need to differentiate between all of the various SVT as I describe, and in the following lecture also I'll try to tell you why we don't need to differentiate all of them. Which of the tachycardia of them are benign? This is possibly more important from a physician's perspective. Some of these SVT are benign. What are those? Sinus tachycardia is generally benign. They can produce symptom if they are very severe. Otherwise, they do not cause any problem or long-term issue with the heart. AVNRT, they are generally benign because they do not cause sudden cardiac death. They do not cause AV block. They do not cause LV dysfunction. Concealed atrioventricular reentrant tachycardia. This probably needs little explanation. Concealed AVRT means AVRT which is narrow QRS. When it can be wide QRS, we will discuss that in this slide itself. And fourth one is atrial tachycardia. So atrial tachycardia is also generally non-life threatening. As I said, if they run weeks together or days together, they can lead to a reversible cardiomyopathy, which is tachycardiomyopathy we call, and they can be reversible. So means if we treat them either medically or by cardioversion or by catheter ablation, the tachycardiomyopathy reverses. So atrial tachycardia can also be benign. What are not so benign are WPW syndrome. That means if a patient has an extra pathway in the heart and which can conduct very rapidly. The difference between an accessory pathway, if we draw here, again, let's say this is our atrium and sorry. So if we have a AV node here and an accessory pathway here, both of them can conduct antegradally. If both of them, this is atrium to ventricle, this is normal AV node that everyone of us know that it can conduct antegradally. There can be some of the accessory pathways which conduct from atrium to ventricle. We call them manifest accessory pathway because even in sinus rhythm, you will get some clue on the ECG which will tell you that the patient has an accessory pathway. There can be few accessory pathway. Let's say there is another pathway here, but that can only have retrograde conduction from ventricle to atrium. So in sinus rhythm, we do not have any indication or clue that this patient has an accessory pathway which can conduct from ventricle to atrium. In fact, this ventricle to atrium conduction is the crucial circuit which creates the AVRT. So during a normal narrow QRS tachycardia, whenever the QRS is narrow, one thing is clear, the atrium to ventricle conduction is via AV node, whatever may be the tachycardia. If the QRS is narrow, like a sinus rhythm, you know the atrium to ventricle limb is AV node. The other limb from ventricle to atrium, it can be an accessory pathway when we call it a AVRT, or it can be another AV node that we call dual AV nodal pathway. There is another pathway here through which the ventricle to atrium goes. We call it a dual AV nodal physiology. This leads to AV reentry, atrioventricular nodal reentry. Some of the other tachycardia which are not benign is atrial flutter and fibrillation. All of you know that they can give rise to ischemic stroke. And again, as I said, atrial tachycardia, if they run for days or weeks together, or sometimes WPW syndrome can lead to LV dysfunction, left ventricular dysfunction. So these three, WPW syndrome as such, it can lead to sudden cardiac death. Atrial fibrillation and flutter, they can lead to strokes. And LV dysfunction can be resulting from incessant atrial tachycardia or LV dysfunction. So we will try to differentiate between them, and I'll tell how to differentiate between them from the subsequent ECGs. So this is a video which is not running. So sinus tachycardia originates in the sinus node and then conducts. So originates in the sinus node. It conducts via AV node and give rise to same number of ventricular beat. If the atrial or sinus rate is 130, the ventricular rate will be 130. In AVNRT, the circuit is here within the AV node. It passively activates the atrium. It passively activates the ventricle. Coming to the ECGs, if we look at this ECG, so there are 2-3 options. I haven't noted them, but let me see what are the poles we have available here. So yeah, so let's say you can try voting on this ECG. What do you think this ECG is? Is it a sinus tachycardia? Is it a AVNRT, AVRT, or atrial tachycardia, or I don't bother? You can start voting here. I do not see any voting. Yeah. Now the vote is coming. I will call you back shortly. So we'll because the vote is I can see the bars varying. We can wait for another 10-15 seconds, then we will stop. Yeah, I can see it is quite stable now. So let me publish the results. So it says sinus tachycardia is given the answer by students around 20%. So I will tell you, this is very, very important. You need to differentiate. First of all, you need to see what is the rate. If you calculate the rate here exactly, the gap between two RR interval is something like 8 or 9 small squares. So the rate of the tachycardia will be something like 160 or 170. Generally, in a resting patient, when you have taken a ECG, TMT is a different situation, but in a resting ECG, 160 or 170 rate generally not physiological. But more importantly, what we can see here, that you do not see any clear P waves. If you do not see a clear P wave, then the chances of sinus tachycardia is very, very less. Because in sinus tachycardia, you will see a clear P wave in front of a QRS complex. Sometimes it is merged within the T wave when the rate is very fast, but generally you will find a P wave just in front of QRS. So that rules out a sinus tachycardia. Among the other 3-4, I will try to differentiate between 1 or 2 or 3. So when you do not find a P wave, you try to look at the end of QRS complex in lead V1 and in lead 2 or lead 3 or AVF. If you find there is a small hump at the end of V1, like an incomplete RBBB, that is called R prime, which is seen only during tachycardia. If you see these patients in sinus rhythm, you will not see the hump. The hump in V1 is something like this. This hump will not be seen in sinus rhythm. Or at the end of lead 2, you can see a negative hump that is called pseudo S. So this suggests that the patient has a possible AV nodal reentry, or in other words, the P wave, which is retrograde now. Why I am telling this? The P wave is retrograde now because the P wave is generated, the AV node is giving rise to the circuit here, and P wave is generated from the inferior direction, inferior to superior. Generally in sinus rhythm, P wave is positive, but in AVNRT or AVRT, it comes below above, inferior to superior. So the P waves will be negative. That is seen in the end of the QRS complex in lead 2 and lead AVF. And that also, if you compare the sinus rhythm ECG, you may not find this hump at the end of V1 or lead 2. That tells you that the patient is having a AV NRT and they have a very short RP interval. I have written short RP, but it is a very short RP interval because this is another concept that, as I said, in AVNRT, the atrium and ventricle activation is actually passive activation. The whole circuit is in the AV node. The atrium and ventricle, they gets activated simultaneously. Hence, the AV interval or a VA interval, they are pseudo interval. It is like the activation is in parallel rather than series. So the R to P, QRS to P wave is very short. That's why you call it a very short RP interval. You see the P waves clinched with the QRS complex. There are a couple of more ECG examples here. If you see here, the pseudo R prime is marked here. Even in lead 2 and AVF, you see a little small hump at the end of QRS complex, which is suggestive of a negative P wave, and that is sine qua non for AV nodal reentrant tachycardia. Coming to the other two tachycardia, atrial fibrillation and flutter. What is the classic ECG pattern of atrial fibrillation? You do not find a properly formed P waves. It looks like a fibrillary wave, what you can see on this ECG on the left hand screen. And the QRS complexes are irregular. That happens because atrial fibrillation bombards the AV node at the rate somewhere around 500 to 600. And obviously, at that rate, the atrium to ventricle cannot conduct unless someone has an accessory pathway. If someone has an accessory pathway has a different property. It can conduct even 300 rate or 400 rate, and that can lead to a essential ventricular fibrillation if a patient develops atrial fibrillation. And that can give rise to sudden cardiac death, even in young or older patients. But otherwise, if a patient do not have an accessory pathway or WPW syndrome, the AV node, it works like a toll plaza. It will not allow more than, let's say, 150, 200 or 300 beats from atrium to ventricle. So even if the atrium fires at a rate of 500, the ventricular rate cannot go more than 200 or 300 as per patient's AV nodal physiology. So the AV node conducts irregularly, hence the ventricular response is irregular. Sometimes it can be fast, sometimes it can be slow, but the classical thing is it has to be irregular. In contrast, atrial tachycardia and atrial flutter, they arise in atrium and they generally conduct with a specific response. 1:1 response, 1:2 response, or 1:3 response, and in them you will find a properly formed P waves. Let us go to the ECGs then. If you look at this ECG, this is a classical ECG pattern of atrial fibrillation. Here the rate is not that fast. The ventricular rate is somewhere around let's say 100 to 110. So this is not very fast rhythm. The rate is already controlled, and we will not call it atrial flutter or fibrillation because we do not find any properly formed P waves. Hence, we will call it a atrial fibrillation. Irrespective of his ventricular rate, which we can see is very controlled, let's say 100 or 110, that can be due to drugs, that can be due to age-related degeneration or sluggishness of the AV node. But this rate is okay for a patient to be maintained. They will generally not be symptomatic. They will not develop a tachycardiomyopathy. So, my question is, in these patients, before I put up the question, in these patients, there are two aspects of management. Here you need them how to manage. You need to know how to manage these patients. So there are two aspects. One is whether you need a rate control or rhythm control about the rhythm. And second is anticoagulation. The first, there are many doubts that the patient whether needs a rate control or rhythm control. But anticoagulation is mandatory if the Charles-Vaz score is more than equal to 2. There is no ambiguity in that. In rate versus rhythm control, it depends on many factors, but the most important factor I would say is persistent atrial fibrillation or a paroxysmal atrial fibrillation. If a patient, you do a Holter in this same patient whose ECG you are seeing, you see the 24 hours he is running in atrial fibrillation. I would say the chances that the patient will achieve sinus rhythm and maintain sinus rhythm, even if you achieve a sinus rhythm after cardioversion, is very less. In contrast, the patients who has paroxysmal atrial fibrillation, where the episodes are short and they self-terminating within 5 to 7 days, less than 7 days, we call them paroxysmal atrial fibrillation. In those patients, we should try to achieve and sustain rhythm, that is sinus rhythm, which actually favorably produces cardiac remodeling. If a patient remains in atrial fibrillation, as long as he remains in atrial fibrillation, there is negative cardiac remodeling goes on, which we do not want. Having said that, in patients who are already in persistent atrial fibrillation, they are having every atrial fibrillation for years or weeks or months together. There is no point in trying to achieve rhythm control. Rather, we need to try to rate control. So, in summary, this patient who has atrial fibrillation going on for weeks, I would suggest rate control is enough, and we do not need rhythm control for these patients. But obviously, his Chasver score is more than equal to 2. They need anticoagulation. Whether you will give them warfarin or acetrom, or you give them NOAC, is up to your choice and patient's affordability. That is the open debate always, and possibly we need to discuss with the patients, because the anticoagulation is a lifelong therapy. So it should not happen we are overzealous for putting them on NOACs, and finally in a borderline finance patients you lose everything, they stop the NOAC altogether after 2 months or 3 months. That will be detrimental. Rather, let them continue. Many of the patients do well on warfarin, although there is enough evidence that NOACs are little better than warfarin and acetrom, except in rheumatic heart disease. I would still say in a constrained finance constrained countries like India, I think coumadins are a good choice for many of our patients. So in this ECG, what we find here is let us open a hole here. So what do you find in this ECG? You can start voting now. I can see almost 100% are voting for atrial flutter. This will be too much of partiality. At least someone give some vote to any of the other. Some can vote for fibrillation, some can vote for sinus tach or atrial tach, so that we can have a better discussion. So I think everyone is voting for 100% vote for atrial flutter, which is absolutely correct. But let me ask you, what do you think? Why do you think this is not atrial tachycardia? That is the most important differential diagnosis of such ECG. So, why this is not atrial tachycardia? There are two reasons to it. One is, in majority of the leads, if you do not find any isoelectric segment in the ECG, that is not a focal atrial tachycardia. It is a re-entry, that is atrial flutter. Like in this ECG, if you look at AVR or V1, or more importantly, let's say if I give you only this lead, V2, then you might feel this is a atrial tachycardia because there is an isoelectric segment. But almost all other leads, all 11 leads except that V2, you find there is no isoelectric segment. That tells you this is a re-entry. That means, what is the major fundamental difference between flutter and atrial tachycardia? So atrial tachycardia is a single foci of abnormal activation or automaticity, or a small re-entry in the small place. Atrial flutter is again a re-entrant circuit, a big re-entrant circuit. That's why during whole of the cardiac cycle, you will find some activity or the other in the atrium. So coming to the original ECG, the diagnosis here is a macro re-entry or atrial flutter and not focal atrial tachycardia. And what is the rate here? The rate means the ventricular rate is 75 and atrial rate is something around 250 to 300. So you can see the PP interval is something like 5 small squares. In that case, the P wave rate will be 300 and the QRS rate is 75 here. That means he is having a 4:1 AV block. We call it AV conduction because it is not a pathological block. This can happen physiologically if the node is little sluggish. So we will call it atrial flutter with a 4:1 conduction, not block. Preferably we can call, you can call it block, but preferentially we should call it a 4:1 conduction. A to V conduction is 4:1. Now again the same question, whether you need to you want a rhythm control here or you want a rate control here. The major difference between atrial flutter and atrial fibrillation is flutter is generally a curable rhythm like a AVNRT, AVRT. We can ablate them, we can control them with medications, we can cardiovert them. They will not recur as frequently as fibrillation. Fibrillation is even if you achieve a cardiac sinus rhythm, even if you do a cardioversion, around 70% of the patients can have a recurrence over next 10 years. Whereas in flutter, it is a treatable rhythm. So possibly in this patient, as an electrophysiologist, I will certainly ask for a rhythm control because that is best without any doubt. And you can maintain or sustain the sinus rhythm in these patients. But there can be a other side of discussion that his ventricular rate is already controlled around 75 per minute. So if the patient is not very keen, if the patient is not very symptomatic, if his LV function is normal, we can probably let him go on this rhythm. But if the 4:1 had not there been a 4:1 conduction, let's say most of the atrial flutter can have a 2:1 conduction with atrial ventricular rate of 150 per minute. So I will try to achieve rhythm control either drugs or by catheter ablation or by cardioversion temporarily followed by a catheter ablation. Typical atrial flutter, although you can achieve a sinus rhythm, they have a tendency to recur unless you ablate them. And once you ablate them, around 90-95% they remain in sinus rhythm for a very long time. The second aspect, again, like atrial fibrillation, you must need anticoagulation even if the patient is having such a controlled ventricular rate. And the anticoagulation strategy is similar to atrial fibrillation because the tendency for stroke is almost same, if not equal, almost same to atrial fibrillation. Now coming to this ECG, I will straight away go, what do you see in this ECG? So I don't know for this I have any poll. So let's say a patient has a history of, this patient has a history of paroxysmal tachycardia, episodic palpitation. What is your diagnosis? Possible diagnosis. This is the sinus rhythm ECG. What is your possible diagnosis? These are our options. What is the most likely diagnosis? This patient having a history of episodic palpitation. I'll just come back in 10 minutes before you close the voting. So I can see around 66% telling AVRT, that is pathway mediated tachycardia. Some are saying this is sinus tachycardia, some are saying this is AVNRT. So first of all, let me clarify again. This is a sinus rhythm ECG. So is there any clue that what are the possible tachycardia he is perceiving during the episodic palpitation? So I can see now almost sinus tachycardia and AVRT are similar. So I will probably agree who are voting for sinus tachycardia, they are voting for this ECG. But generally this heart rate of around 100 beats per minute, they do not perceive a palpitation. What we are talking is this patient can develop episodic palpitation and AVRT intermittently. So what is it there in the ECG? So The important clue on the ECG is, you see the PR interval is short. As soon as the P is completed, the QRS shoots off. As soon as the P is completed, the QRS shoots off most of the leads. So we call them a short PR interval. And this slurring, what you see here, this slurring of QRS complex in contrast to other ECGs is called a delta wave. So this is a ECG of an accessory pathway or a WPW syndrome patient. And these patients have a tendency to develop atrioventricular reentrant tachycardia. So the correct answer would be AVRT. But that ECG I have not shown here. I will show this patient's ECG a little later. Now, this is, let's say, this same patient whose ECG I have shown in the previous one. The same patient develops a palpitation and you record such an ECG, which is a wide QRS, and the ECG is in front of you. What do you call this? I'm starting a poll here. I should have another option here, but it's all right. So what is the possible rhythm? I have shown the sinus rhythm ECG of this patient in the previous slide. And now the same patient, I told that the patient has episodic palpitation. Now he has this ECG. First of all, let me remind you that the patient has a wide QRS ECG on this, what you are seeing here. So, in a given background, there will be multiple debates, but in emergency, if this patient presents to you, if someone diagnoses it as a ventricular tachycardia, that has to be treated as ventricular tachycardia. What is against ventricular tachycardia here? There are subtle clues why the ventricular tachycardia, we are not telling you or calling it as a ventricular tachycardia here. So the patient has a wide QRS tachycardia, then why not VT? You can notice there is a subtle RR variability. The RR variability is most clearly seen in these beats. There is a RR variability here, this gap. Even without that, there is subtle variation. You see this RR interval and this RR interval. The second one is short. See this RR interval and some of the RR interval is this RR interval is shorter. So this is one of the classical ECG of atrial fibrillation in a patient who has an accessory pathway and there is a rapid conduction over the accessory pathway. I have shown you the accessory pathway evidence in the previous sinus rhythm ECG. And now, if that patient develops atrial fibrillation, the ECG will be something like this. There will be subtle variation within the QRS complexes, as you can see here, That is because when a patient develops atrial fibrillation, is try to conduct via accessory pathway. It also tries to conduct via AV node. So there is a competition between the accessory pathway and AV node. So the QRS morphology can be wider, can be narrower, can be in between. So there is a subtle change. So in the QRS morphology, so this is called rapid, fast, irregular tachycardia. So rapid and fast can happen. Rapid, wide, irregular tachycardia. So rapid can happen in VT, wide can happen in VT, but irregularity cannot happen in a run-of-the-mill ventricular tachycardia. That there only the differential diagnosis comes of accessory pathway mediated tachycardia, and in accessory pathway mediated tachycardia there can be two types of tachycardia which can be wide. One is called antidromic tachycardia, and other is called atrial fibrillation with pathway conduction. The antidromic tachycardia we will discuss in another ECG which we do have. Now this is one of the ECG and let us vote for the same again. Sorry. Yeah, you can vote for the ECG now. What is the diagnosis? So most of you telling it is AVRT. What are the clues? By the time we get the voting, let us discuss about the clue. So in a narrow QRS tachycardia, where you do not find a P wave clearly, sinus tachycardia is almost ruled out. Most of the atrial tachycardia also shows up some P wave. So atrial tachycardia also is a very rare possibility, because most of the atrial tachycardia, they have a short PR interval. So you can have a P wave preceding the QRS complex. So the essential two differential diagnosis on this ECG is AVNRT and AVRT, and which has been rightly voted. Around 46% is AVRT and 46% is AVNRT. They have been equally voted. Now I will tell you what are the clues to look for to differentiate between the two. As we discussed earlier, that if you find the R prime, or if you find a pseudo S in lead 2-3 AVF, in fact, on this ECG, you can see V1 has a R prime and lead 2 has a small narrow P wave. So this is suggestive of AVNRT. There are subtle other clues in this ECG which can favor AVRT actually, that is accessory pathway mediated tachycardia. If you look at carefully in V1, you can find that there is a QRS alternance. So QRS alternance is a classical finding of AVRT, a pathway mediated tachycardia. Why it is narrow here? Because this patient has a concealed pathway. It is not like a WPW, antegrade conduction cannot happen over the accessory pathway. It can only conduct during tachycardia from ventricle to atrium. So this ECG has a mixture of findings. Some points are in favor, like a pseudo R or R prime and pseudo S in lead 2-3 AVF. In contrast, it also has some evidence called electrical alternance in V1, which goes in favor of AVRT. So this patient had AVNRT, although someone answers it as AVRT, I will take the answer. Now, what do you do with this? What is the best possible treatment option for this patient? That's why I said that you do not always need to differentiate between them. So last voting, we found around 50% of us said it is AVNRT, 45% of us says AVRT. But you don't need to differentiate between the two, because the treatment is essentially same. So what should you do first in this ECG? We have a differential diagnosis of AVNRT versus AVRT, and yes, we are correctly on the vote that the first procedure or the maneuver we should do is a vagal maneuver, that is carotid sinus massage or Valsalva maneuver, because around 60% of the patients, if we do the maneuver properly, they terminate even out without any drugs. Rest of the 40%, they do need medication. Adenosine and diltiazem, they are good alternatives. Amiodarone, I will definitely not advise for this patient who has a narrow regular tachycardia and do not have any atrial fibrillation or flutter, and DC cardioversion is almost contraindicated unless the patient very rarely can have a hemodynamic compromise. So now this patient you have converted to sinus rhythm, and the ECG looks there is no delta wave, no short PR interval, no WPW syndrome. What is your treatment options available? The treatment option can be medical. That means you can put them on long-term medications like oral diltiazem, oral verapamil, or oral beta blocker. In beta blocker, you can give metoprolol, you can give propranolol, you can give bisoprolol. So none of the drugs have a major long-term side effect. But if the patient has recurrences, multiple recurrences on medication, or the patient presents with syncope, then ablation becomes the first choice. Otherwise, medical management is the first choice, especially in the first episode of PSVT, because it has been noted that some of the patients, around 20% of the patients, the first episode is the only episode in life. They do not have any recurrence. So if a patient has a first episode of narrow QRS regular tachycardia and it has terminated with Valsalva or adenosine, you are almost sure that the patient has either AVNRT or concealed AVRT. In the first episode, you do not need immediate catheter ablation. A medical management is enough. In some of them, even we can leave if the rate is not very fast, we can live without even medication. If there is a WPW syndrome, coming to the third segment, let's say you had this ECG, and when you terminated the tachycardia, you have a ECG something like this. So I have shown the ECG, the narrow QRS, which we were dealing with, and with the adenosine we have terminated. Now you have terminated the tachycardia, and this is the sinus rhythm ECG. You see here, as noted, there is a short PR interval. When you see there is a delta wave and a short PR interval, that means you know the patient has a WPW syndrome, who already I showed you the patient has a documented tachycardia. These patients are at risk of sudden cardiac death if they develop atrial fibrillation. In those cases where you have atrial, where you have a documented tachycardia and baseline ECG shows WPW syndrome, catheter ablation is the first choice even before medication. We'll come back to our ECG, which I am trying to show. So this was the ECG, and we have terminated with adenosine. After that, I have shown you the ECG, which shows the pre-excitation. In that case, the third choice of the WPW syndrome is catheter ablation. If someone doesn't opt for catheter ablation, they need to be treated with medications which can block both accessory pathway as well as AV node. Like we have to give either amiodarone or sotalol, or we can give beta blocker and flecainide together. Coming to this ECG, so again I will open the voting. There are some subtle clues that will point to a tachycardia entity. So let's vote for this. This is a patient who is a young lady who has come with a tachycardia. The rate is around 200, 220. So what is the most likely mechanism of this tachycardia? Although you do not need to differentiate them, as I said earlier, that you can just try adenosine. Whenever you find a narrow QRS regular tachycardia, always try vagal maneuver or adenosine. But for a theoretical purpose, if you need to differentiate, try to differentiate, you need to look for evidences of pseudo R and pseudo S in V1 and V lead 2 respectively. If you find them, most likely it is AVNRT. If you do not find them, most likely they are AVRT. But you need to look for another two things. One is the QRS alternance. That is not here. QRS alternance is not present here. But what is present here, a prominent ST changes. STT changes is noted here in lead 2 and not in the other two leads. The significant STT changes in a young lady will possibly point towards the AVRT. So this patient, I do not find any pseudo R, although some might say that there is a small pseudo S in lead 2, but with given STT changes in this patient qualifies or has everything in favor of a concealed AVRT via left-sided accessory pathway. So to summarize, if you find a R prime in V1 or pseudo S in inferior leads, it is AVNRT. If you find QRS alternance, that is AVRT. If you find positive P wave in inferior leads, that suggests the activation wavefront is coming from above downwards. I will try to explain this. So in AVNRT and AVRT, the atrium is activated below upwards. So the P waves, if it is visible, the P waves will be negative in inferior leads. Whereas in atrial tachycardia, wherever it originates from, either left atrium or right atrium, the activation will be up below. So the P waves will be positive. If I have some case example, I will show. So if you find a positive P wave in inferior lead, it suggests it is atrial tachycardia. If the tachycardia continues despite a AV block, that means you have a 3:1, 4:1 conduction, then it suggests it is neither AVNRT, neither AVRT. It will be either atrial tachycardia or a fibrillation or a flutter. So this is the ECG of a patient where I have shown you the patient had a narrow QRS regular tachycardia, and this is the post-adenosine ECG. What are the things you are looking at it? This is important because you need to prognosticate the patient. If you, in this ECG, you see there is no clear delta wave Although the PR interval looks little short, but there is no clear delta wave, no significant STD changes. That means this patient, at least at this moment, do not have any pathway conducting antegradely. There can be retrograde conduction that we call a concealed accessory pathway. So this patient do not have a risk of sudden cardiac death. This patient generally do not have a chance of sudden collapse from atrial fibrillation or a VF. This patient generally will not develop a tachycardiomyopathy. So this patient is a relatively safe patient. The only thing which I am interested in looking after giving adenosine is whether the patient has evidence of accessory pathway, delta wave, pre-excitation, short PR interval. Like this. If after termination with adenosine you find this ECG, you know the patient has accessory pathway, we are going for ablation in this patient straight away, and we are not relying on medications only. Now coming to some of the case examples. So this is a 25-year-old gentleman. Read the heading carefully. So it's a post ASD device closure at the age of 5 years. Now he is 25 years of age. So after 20 years of his operation, now he is perceiving a palpitation. His ejection fraction is 30%. And he is in NYHA class 3, even orthopneic rather. You can call it NYHA class 4. So what is the most likely pathology here? The options are given below. I will give you the poll. I do not find the poll here. So let us start with anyone. So just follow the yeah. So as correctly pointed out by most of us, this patient is having an atrial flutter. You can see if you blind yourself, just remove the QRS complex from lead 3. Just remove the QRS complex from lead 2 or lead 3. You can see a sawtooth pattern very well visible in lead 2 and lead 3. So this patient has developed atrial fibrillation after 20 years of his initial procedure. ASD is one of the entity which is prone for atrial flutter. And because flutter can run weeks or months together, this patient presented after a month or so, and he has developed a tachycardiomyopathy. He underwent the ablation, and this is the ECG after ablation. His ejection fraction normalized. So you have rightly noted the patient had atrial flutter which has been treated. There are various types of flutter. The typical flutter originates in the right atrium, and we can treat it something called cavo-tricuspid isthmus line. So just drawing an ablation line between the tricuspid valve and the inferior vena cava. So now we'll go to some of the ECGs. And let's see our voting. So this patient, what is the possible tachycardia? I'll take another 10 seconds before I close the voting. As of now, or I'll not reveal the vote. So let us start the discussion. So generally, if you see such a clear P waves in front of QRS, before QRS complex, AV-NRT and AV-RT are less likely. That can happen, but less likely. The atypical variety or the rarer variety of AV-RT or AV-RT. So the major differential diagnosis is this patient either has a sinus tachycardia or this patient has a atrial tachycardia. These two are the major differential diagnosis. So how to tell that this patient has atrial tachycardia or a sinus tachycardia? And the answer is the P wave morphology. If the P wave morphology is like a normal patient or normal P wave, then it is 99% sinus tachycardia. If the P wave morphology is abnormal, then it is atrial tachycardia. As simple as that. But how do you know what is the normal P wave morphology? Because the normal sinus P wave originates in the right atrium in the sinus node. The usual P wave morphology is inferior leads positive, 2-3 AVF positive, as seen in this patient. Lead 1 and AVL have a positive P wave morphology because they are left-sided leads and the activation is wavefront is coming from the right atrium. So lead 1 and AVL will be positive vector in a normal sinus rhythm P waves. And V1 will have a positive negative vector, positive followed by negative. If these three criteria are fulfilled, inferior leads positive, 1 AVL positive, V1 is positive negative, then it qualifies for a sinus P wave morphology, which is here present. Hence, we will call it a sinus tachycardia, not atrial tachycardia. So I will reset the poll and I will start the voting here. You can start voting. Yeah, so almost 90% of us are correct that the patient has atrial fibrillation, which we have discussed. Just for a revise, that when you do not find any P wave and there are some fibrillary waves, especially here seen in lead V1 and lead 3 and lead 1, we know that this is atrial fibrillation. Now, this is a tricky one. Look it carefully before I open the voting. He is a 35-year-old gentleman. He has a hypertrophic obstructive cardiomyopathy. He has occasional vertigo. Now, there are the options are, this is one of the run noted during a Holter. Now, here your diagnosis is very, very crucial because on basis of that, your therapeutic options will be tremendously different. If we call it a SVT, then he doesn't need anything. If we call it a VT, then the scenario completely changes together in background of HOCM. And if we call it VF, there is no other doubt at all. Some can call it an artifact as well. So it's good that we are getting votes for both VT and SVT. I wanted that, and I want to discuss why we have put up this ECG. So in HOCM patients or hypertrophic cardiomyopathy patients, even non-obstructive, we as a physician or a cardiologist have a tendency to write a Holter for risk stratification. Many times you will get such short run of ventricular tachycardia or a supraventricular tachycardia. Now, why there is supraventricular tachycardia? Generally, these patients has a higher left atrial pressure. Hence, there is a tendency for short runs of atrial tachycardia from the left atrium. Sometimes they do develop atrial fibrillation or flutter, but more commonly they have a atrial tachycardia. If they develop atrial fibrillation or flutter, they are candidates for anticoagulation. But if they have atrial tachycardia, they do not need anticoagulation. They just need a rate control or rhythm control drug according to the frequency of those short run of atrial tachycardia. But if we find wide QRS runs, that is NSVT, that is one of a high risk factor for patients having HOCM in background. Now you have to be careful before reporting this. Why we are worried on this ECG or Holter strip is because the run is wide QRS. So we are tending to call it a VT. But if you compare the second half of the strip, this half of the strip, the short run, with this, you see the QRS morphology is almost same. If you look at the second channel here, which is even during tachycardia or during sinus, it has an incomplete RBBB morphology. So during tachycardia and during a presumed ventricular tachycardia, although we have only two channels, the QRS morphology is exactly same. That means it is most likely a supraventricular tachycardia. I will re-emphasize, and I have couple of ECGs just in contrast to this ECG. I will tell again, if a patient develops a tachycardia, which is wide QRS, but the QRS morphology is same as in sinus rhythm, that means the patient has a bundle branch aberrancy. Let's say this patient had a right bundle branch aberrancy in the sinus rhythm itself. Many patients have LBBB or RBBB or incomplete RBBB is very frequent. If they developed a atrial tachycardia, the morphology will remain same. But if they develop a VT, the QRS vector, the QRS morphology will change. So this patient had a SVT and do not need any ICD. In contrast, if you look at this ECG, this patient is a post-CAVG, 50-year-old gentleman, moderate LV dysfunction, and has come with this tachycardia of around 50 beats per, around 150 beats per minute, and you terminate the tachycardia with amiodarone, and this is the sinus rhythm ECG. So what is the diagnosis? It is VT, because you see the QRS, you see the axis completely changed. You see the lead 1 here, lead V1, V2 here, it is completely different. So this tells you whether the patient has a VT or SVT. There are multiple morphology criteria, hana, tana, but the most important thing is whether your 12 lead ECG during tachycardia is similar to your sinus rhythm ECG. If it is similar to sinus rhythm ECG, the QRS morphology and vector, most likely you have a SVT. If it is not similar, then it is most likely VT. Now we go to this one. So go through the history carefully, and I will put up the voting now. Easy fatigability, ejection fraction is 50%, LV cavity is mildly dilated, is a hypertensive patient. What is the most possible diagnosis and how do we treat the patient? So almost 50% of us has answered correctly. This is atrial flutter, but we need to know why the others are not correct, because if you remove V1 from this ECG, even all other 11 leads, someone can call it a sinus tachycardia. The only channel or only lead which gives us the diagnosis of atrial flutter is lead V1, where we find the P wave rate is somewhere around 300 or maybe 280, and there is 2:1 conduction. Hope everyone is getting here. So I'm marking the P. This is the P, this is the P, this is the P, this is the P, this is the P. So there is a 2:1 conduction of P waves, what is evident on V1, and we are calling it a atrial flutter because of two reasons. One, in most of the time there is a sawtooth, although this is not a classical sawtooth, but there is some electrical activity going on. Second, the rate is above 250. If the P wave rate is below 250 and there is an isoelectric line, we will call it atrial tachycardia. Sinus tachycardia is not possible because generally they will have 1:1 conduction. And more importantly, if you look at the P wave morphology, that tells you that this is not originating from sinus node. The P wave morphology in V1, as you note here, is completely positive. Generally, as I said, in a sinus rhythm, the P wave morphology is V1 is like this. But here, the P wave morphology is completely positive in V1. This is a classical morphology of a atrial tachycardia or a atrial flutter, which originates in left atrium. The left atrium is a left-sided structure and a posterior structure. V1 is a right-sided lead and an anterior lead. Hence, the vector, full vector comes forward and produces a positive QRS complex. This is classical P wave or atrial flutter or tachycardia seen in rheumatic heart disease. Predominantly, we can call it roughly as a left atrial flutter or a left atrial tachycardia. We will not call it general AVNRT or AVRT because in AVNRT and AVRT, the A to V ratio is 1:1. So, in this background also, why the patient is having a easy fatigability or ejection fraction 50%? This is because this flutter or tachycardia can go run on and on and on, and because of that the patient has a persistent heart rate of around QRS rate which is around 140 to 150, and that causes the tachycardiomyopathy. If you can tackle the tachycardia medically or by catheter ablation, you can achieve sinus rhythm again and the ejection fraction will be normalized. Now going to this ECG, I am resetting the pole, which is the most likely tachycardia. So which is the most likely tachycardia? You can, oh, there is no voting given, sorry. So if you see here, there is a very narrow QRS complex, but importantly you note there is a significant STT changes in lead 2, lead 3 and AVF. That tells you the patient possibly has AVRT, right? So the patient possibly has a AVRT, correct? AVNRT is not a likely diagnosis here. We do not find any R prime. We do not find a pseudo S in inferior leads. And this is the ECG of the previous patient which I have showed, who has a WPW syndrome or pre-excitation. So I'm not putting any MCQ on this one. This is the just sinus rhythm ECG of the previous one. So this patient, after we terminated with adenosine, this is the ECG which shows that he has a pre-excitation. Rather, if I have a suitable option, I will try to go how to manage this patient. I asked them to put, so I'll just narrate that. So this patient, because he has a WPW syndrome, they have a tendency for a small risk of sudden cardiac death. And you have seen that the patient has a documented SVT already. So this patient goes for the first class 1 indication for catheter ablation. If they do not prefer for that, then we can give medication. So this is the same patient who has developed this ECG after catheter ablation. So what do you think? I'll put up option 1 and option 2. So option 1 is physiological and option 2 is pathological. Add insert. I don't know why I'm not able to see. Sorry, I cannot have this. So I'll just narrate. So you can see there is deep T wave inversion in lead 2, 3 AVF. So this is not, this is a young gentleman of some 25-year-old who has underwent the ablation for accessory pathway. And you find this deep T wave inversion after the ablation. Are you worried? Have you done any damage to the coronary arteries that there is deep T wave inversion? So I'll rather look at the chat box if anyone has any answer for this, because I cannot open a voting. So Amritendu has written pathological. Anyone else? So I have shown you, I'll again show you the ECG. So this is the sinus rhythm ECG of the patient. And now this is after ablation. Anyone else going for pathological or physiological ECG? There is T wave in 2, 3 AVF. So Prajwal also attempted that it is pathological. And now Kari Harita has written it is physiological. So who has the Harita has written physiological? Why do you think this is physiological? Can you try to answer? Biplab Sarkar has written physiological, someone has written pathological. So any answer for physiological, we can understand there is every reason to call it pathological. Whoever has written is physiological. I want to know what is going in their mind. So what happens, because pre-excitation is something like a abnormal ventricular activation, like a VT, they develop the abnormal depolarization of ventricle in a left-sided pathway. The LV starts getting depolarized during sinus rhythm I'm talking about, before ablation. So this patient, let's say this patient has a right-sided pathway. So the right ventricle will start getting activated earlier. In a left-sided pathway, the LV myocardium will get activated earlier before RV. So there is an abnormal activation. There is non-synchronous activation of LV and RV. When you correct them, they have something called memory T sign. So in those leads where they have negative delta, like this ECG, lead 2, lead 3, lead AVF, they have negative delta in the inferior leads because this is an inferior pathway. When you ablate them, they will show a T wave change because of the previous memory. The depolarization was abnormal since birth, and now after 25 years, you have suddenly rectified the depolarization. That is being reflected in the repolarization pattern. This T wave inversion can remain for few weeks to few months. It depends how long you had the abnormal depolarization of ventricle. The longer you have the abnormal depolarization, the memory T sign will remain longer in those patients. So this is physiological, provided the T wave inversion corresponds to the same leads where you have negative delta. Like here, you saw the negative delta was seen in lead 2, 3 AVF, and the same thing you notice in the next sinus rhythm ECG. So this is pathological. This is called memory T wave sign. Now we'll go for this poll. You can start voting now. So this is a 22-year-old lady. SOB, palpitation, ejection fraction is 35%. What is the possible diagnosis? The fifth one is out of the screen. The fifth one is AVRT. So we are going ahead with most of the votes are for atrial flutter, and that is the correct answer. This one is again little tricky. I will just try to tell you that you have to, for this diagnosing this ECG, you have to blind yourself about the QRS complex. When you blind yourself with the QRS complex, then you can find there is a sawtooth pattern going on in lead 2 in the rhythm strip, and that tells you that this patient either has atrial flutter or atrial tachycardia. It cannot be AVNRT or AVRT because there is a 2:1 pattern in majority of the ECG, and it cannot be atrial fibrillation because you can see clear P waves. Is the same patient which gives you a more clearer picture that occasionally the patient has a sinus rhythm beat. This is the sinus beat, and possibly this is the sinus beat, and rest of the beater. These are very short, ill-sustained atrial flutter or atrial tachycardia. Probably this is the last case example for us today. Now we have a ECG like this. So I will again look at the chat box. You can try to give your diagnosis. Your options are SVT, AVNRT, AVRT, AT. Second option is antidromic tachycardia. Third option is ventricular tachycardia, and fourth option is VF. I will look at the chat box and wait for your answers. So I have got 2 response and they say it is VT. It is a wide regular tachycardia. We do not find any VA dissociation, but if you look carefully at AVR, there is a possible VA dissociation. Only AVR is showing some possible P waves, possibly. I'm not sure. And the VA relation is something like 2:1 VA relation. So I have got almost 10 votes and all of them are saying VT. Now, let me put the question in a different way. Is there any differential diagnosis for this? And if there is any differential diagnosis, what is the answer? Let's say I tell you this is not VT. So what could be the other answer? I can give you options as well. The option is SVT with aberrancy. The option is antidromic tachycardia. Let's say these two are your options, and let's say let's put it simpler way. Yeah, these two are the options. Third option is obviously VT. All of you have told that this is VT, but I am telling kotha, let's say this is not VT. What is the other differential diagnosis? Even medical terms, you cannot be so pragmatic that it has to be VT. I have seen at least 10 patients like this ECG which is not VT. So that's why I'm putting the question. Now, I am asking for answers. If this is not VT, what is the diagnosis? I'm not getting any response, possibly because I haven't explained. Oh, good. That I have got answer from Navendu, which he says SVT with aberrancy. So I will tell you why this is also very, very important to understand why this is not SVT with aberrancy. Firstly, if anyone asks, like me, if anyone asks you what is the diagnosis, first 10 times you tell this is VT only. But as I said, I have seen at least 10 patients like this where, someone Amritendu told it is antidromic tachycardia. It is very, very possible a strong differential diagnosis of such VT is antidromic tachycardia. What is that? So that is, Paja sir, can I have another 10 minutes or so to finish the things?
Jayati, is there any other program? Okay, you carry on. I will settle.
I think anyway you have 5 minutes, so we can finish in 7 minutes. Yeah, by 7 o'clock. So what is antidromic tachycardia? Generally, the AVRT is antegrade limb from A to V is via AV node and retrograde limb is via pathway. But the reverse can happen. What is the reverse? If you have an accessory pathway on the left side, let's say, or right side, and that conducts from atrium to ventricle. So the antegrade limb is abnormal, not the AV node. In those cases, the QRS will be wide and they will be exactly like VT. There is no human being, even computers, which can differentiate between a ventricular tachycardia and an antidromic tachycardia from the tachycardia ECG. So, in those antidromic tachycardia, from A to V is abnormal limb, that is accessory pathway, and V to A is the retrograde limb, which is via AV node. That means it is the reverse of usual AVRT. So now there are two questions in this ECG. Why this is not SVT aberrancy? Because SVT aberrancy will have a morphology which conforms or matches the usual bundle branch block morphology. If you look at V1, this patient has a RBBB morphology VT. Kotha, if we tell that this is a RBBB morphology SVT aberrancy, the RBBB will be like a normal garden variety RS R dash. And there will be some transition. V6 will be having a small s, and it cannot have such a monomorphic R wave concordance from V1 to V6. And the initial slurring, look at the initial slurring of this QRS complex. So all this favors, this is either a myocardial ventricular tachycardia or a antidromic tachycardia. And from a 12 lead ECG, Nobody in the world possibly can differentiate between the two. What can differentiate between the two is either a response to adenosine. If you give adenosine and the tachycardia terminates, that means you possibly know that the tachycardia was also going through the AV node, and it is possible the patient had antidromic tachycardia. And most importantly, the 12 lead ECG. If such a patient has antidromic tachycardia, almost 99% of the time you expect a pre-excitation when you achieve sinus rhythm, because antidromic tachycardia can only happen in patient who has an antegrade conduction from A to V. Now, I show you the sinus rhythm ECG of this same patient. Now again I will look at the chat box and tell me the answer. We discussed now that the patient either has a VT or has a antidromic tachycardia. No other possible differential diagnosis. It cannot be SVT with aberrancy. It cannot be simple SVT. Now we have the sinus rhythm ECG of the same patient. Can we have the responses now, whether he had a VT or a antidromic tachycardia? This was his tachycardia ECG. This is sinus ECG. We have two options. It is either it is a VT, or as I discussed, it is an antidromic tachycardia. So I am not getting a single response. I hope my internet is not down. Possibly I'm not clear what I said. It is possible that I was not clear what I said. That's why there is no response in the chat box. At least I cannot see. So yeah, I got one answer at least. So Harita says it is antidromic tachycardia. Parvez said this is antidromic tachycardia, and they are absolutely wrong. Okay, so I will tell you. Yeah, Amritendu finally and Nilashri said it is VT. That means I want to re-emphasize, if you have a wide QRS ECG and after you terminate with a shock, in the baseline ECG you do not find any QRS pre-excitation, that means it was VT. If you find there is a gross pre-excitation or WPW, that means this patient has a antidromic tachycardia. So the final answer is this patient had a wide QRS, which is SVT aberrancy is not possible from this QRS morphology. If you look at the sinus rhythm ECG, there is no pre-excitation in sinus rhythm. So essentially, for all practical purposes, you can rule out antidromic tachycardia, and your initial diagnosis of VT stands correct. So the take home is SVT is mostly benign and treatable. Do not ignore sinus tachycardia, because one of the sinus tachycardia ECG, only one sinus tachycardia ECG I have shown to you, that patient had an acute massive pulmonary embolism, and he was refused admission in one hospital, saying that you have a sinus tachycardia, go home. The patient came with a shortness of breath. Finally, he was diagnosed to have a right ventricular predominance, sinus tachycardia, S1Q3T3, CT pulmonary angiogram confirmed a pulmonary embolism. The treatment options are medical versus radiofrequency ablation. The RFA is a first choice in cases of WPW syndrome and atrial flutter, where it is very nicely curable. Flutter and fibrillation are synonymous to anticoagulation, and tachycardiomyopathy, sometimes induced by atrial tachycardia, is a treatable entity. I'll stop here and take up any questions. Thank you so much for the opportunity, Panja sir.
Thank you, Dr. Devapoto. If there is any question, just I think 2 to 3 questions may be answered today, and you should get prepared. Next class, Devapoto, is it okay if they come up with there some confusion?
Yes, absolutely perfect. We'll start with
that. Will make,
next session. First half an hour we'll discuss their confusion and questions. Then we'll start our discussion.
So can I keep on the coming Monday that class?
Sure, sir. Sure,
if
sir.
You are,
sure.
Okay. So before that, I make just one small announcement that next class will be by acute coronary syndrome by Dr. Oyan Kaur. And in the coming week, Dr. Devapoto, this week, Dr. Oyan Kaur will take, and coming week, Dr. Devapoto will take the first class on ECG. And then there will be another class, there will be a request from the our audience about the movement disorder, that is a neurological disorder. And about there will be a second class in the coming week, that will be the neurological movement disorder, some sort of with some focus, because it is a huge chapter, so that cannot be but for the exam point of view, that will we will keep it. Okay, please, you can come forward with your questions for discussion. I think there is no question. So just one small question I am asking. I am not writing. That is, so with in a nutshell, suppose there is a confusion that which kind of tachycardia is there, like SVT with aberrancy, sometimes VT or antidromic. So can, for practical purpose, can we give the adenosine? Okay, then if it not converts, then we go for the treatment for the VT.
In wide QRS tachycardia you are talking, sir?
Yeah, wide complex tachycardia.
So I will simplify this. Is a very pertinent question what you asked, that a patient has come with a wide QRS morphology tachycardia. The most and foremost thing is whether the patient is hemodynamically stable or not. You forget about SVT aberrancy, you forget about antidromic, forget about VT. If the patient is hemodynamically unstable, cardiovert the patient first of all. Forget about atrial fibrillation, flutters, chances of stroke, everything. Because many times, if we have VT or accessory pathway mediated wide QRS tachycardia, it will be hemodynamically unstable. Once you stabilize the patient, one important thing, if the patient is hemodynamically stable, at least take a 12 lead ECG, because that gives many of our answers. So now once you have stabilized the patient, that let's say the patient is running a tachycardia of 150, 160, but he is holding his BP. I would say there is no harm in giving adenosine, provided you have a defibrillator standby. Because and the patient do not have any known structural heart disease. You may not have a echo always in emergency or in a OPD practice. So, but if a patient presents with a wide QRS tachycardia and you suspect that the patient is a young, let's say 40-year-old gentleman, no comorbidity, no hypertension, diabetes to create a coronary artery disease, you can try adenosine. There is only one caution. Why I have to have a defibrillator beside? Because occasionally antidromic tachycardia, which is a differential diagnosis of VT, and we are trying to differentiate between them by giving adenosine, the patients have occasionally an accessory pathway. Only then they can give rise to an antidromic tachycardia. It might happen the tachycardia stops and atrial fibrillation starts. Adenosine has a around 2 to 3% chance of inducing atrial fibrillation in pathway patients. And in those cases, the patient can throw a VF if the atrial fibrillation rarely starts and the patient has an accessory pathway. If there is a VF, there is only one therapy which can save you, that is a shock. So, in other words, the patient came with a monomorphic VT. Let's say it was an antidromic tachycardia. We gave adenosine. It terminated. In a very rare situation, if our luck is not favoring us, it might induce us atrial fibrillation around 2 to 3% of the patient, and the patient can go into VF. So that is the only caution. Otherwise, if I think the patient do not have any structural heart disease, I will certainly try to give adenosine if I suspect antidromic tachycardia. If a patient has a CABG done earlier, if a patient is a known DCM patient, then whatever may be the morphology, wide QRS tachycardia is synonymous with VT, I will not try adenosine. Patient has a HCM, patient has a DCM, patient has ICMP, then certainly I will not try adenosine. Straight away I will cardiovert him and see the sinus rhythm ECG. That will give you the answer whether it was antidromic tachycardia or it was the VT. If the sinus rhythm ECG shows you pre-excitation, you know it was antidromic tachycardia. If the sinus rhythm ECG doesn't show pre-excitation, you know it was VT. Hope it answers your question, sir. So there are a couple of questions here. I'll answer one by one. So Nilashri has asked, can we discuss atrial tachycardia diagnostic once more? So very simple. You need to know the sinus P wave morphology. If your sinus P wave morphology matches with the tachycardia P wave morphology, then it is sinus tachycardia. If your P wave morphology during tachycardia is not the usual sinus P, then it is atrial tachycardia. Now, let me enumerate what are the features of sinus P wave morphology. Because it originates in the superior part of right atrium, the inferior leads will have positivity in lead 2, 3 AVF. The lead 1 and AVL will have positive P waves, and V1 will have a positive negative morphology. Hence, if these three features are fulfilled, you know this is sinus tachycardia. If either one is not there, let's say 2, 3 AVF shows a negative P wave, you know that is atrial tachycardia. If V1, I showed one ECG, if V1 shows completely positive P wave morphology, you know that is not sinus tachycardia. So this is answer for Nilas 3. So Prajjal has asked, do you have to be careful in patient's ECG shows ectopic? How to proceed further and what with this type of patients? Okay. So ectopics, generally if you have a monomorphic PVC, the patients are generally safe. If you have multiple morphology PVC, you know possibly the patient have an underlying structural heart disease. Try to get a cardiac MRI done if possible, and the diagnosis is not clear from echo. That means if you have a monomorphic PVC throughout the day on Holter or ECG, most likely they are idiopathic. If the morphology is varying, you know it is possibly underlying structural heart disease. Second, if the coupling interval, this needs little elaboration. So P, QRS, T. If the PVC comes somewhere here, after the end of T wave, generally they are safe PVC. They do not have a sudden death risk. But if the PVC comes within the end of T wave, so here there is a possibility of R on T phenomena, and it can induce a torsades and VF, and they are at risk of sudden cardiac death. So you need to suppress the PVC either by medication or catheter ablation. We call it a short coupled PVC. So I think these are all. Amna Goswami has...
Sir, I think today we have to
wind up. Okay, wrap it up. Okay, sir. Thank you.
Achha, sorry for the year, because there may be some questions.
Yes, sir.
First of all, one small compliment from one of our senior, our teacher. So, Madam Abna Goswami has just given one compliment. You have made the subject very easy. It is a difficult subject.
Hopefully. I don't know. It is truly sometimes very difficult, especially for medicine residents. I do agree. Even cardiology residents find sometimes it is difficult. Hopefully, most of the students have grasped it. Sir, just I have a doubt.
Yeah.
Next Monday, you are asking Ayan to present on ischemia?
No. Okay. Ayan will present on Friday. That is acute coronary syndrome. And Monday you will present, and after that again Friday there will be some neurology class that I told you.
Okay. So Monday we will discuss the topic. We can keep it the rest of the wide QRS tachycardia, VT and everything, because VT needs a little elaboration on the management also.
So, and also I think there may be some questions from the audience.
Yes, we'll start with that. We'll start first half an hour will be question answer, then followed by 1 hour we'll have discussion on wide QRS tachycardia and miscellaneous. And in between, Ayan is discussing the ischemia, so we can put up some of those ECGs also, just for a clarification. Yes. Okay, sir. So, we'll wrap it up today, sir.
We will. Just before that, I want to thank you, all audience, as well as particularly thank Dr. Devabrata for spending your valuable time.
So there is one question. We'll answer that on the next day. Shreya has asked a question. We'll try to answer that on the next day. You just note it down. We'll definitely clarify your queries.
Okay. I am keeping all the questions saved in my computer.
Okay, sir.
Okay. Screenshot I have kept.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, Jayati and all ACP forum for giving us the platform without any conflict of interest.
Yes.
And with this, I will thank all the audiences as well as the ACP forum. And if you have any feedback, anything, you can just send us by mail, and also tomorrow you will get one email to get your feedback. And if you have any
Okay.
suggestions, you can also put it forward. Those who ask for the certificate, that certificate we can send the soft copy of the certificates. You can get the printout. Okay. Okay. So with
Thank you.
this, I will thank you. If in case any announcement, Jayati, you can announce that, and then you can close this session.
Thank you so much. Thank you, Dr. Bera. Thank you, Dr. Panja. As sir has already told, please put in your feedbacks, and once you share your feedbacks, we will be getting the e-certificate, and within 24 hours of this session, you will be getting the recorded version at edu.hcpforum.com. That you will receive on your mail. Click onto that, register in HCP Forum, and you will be able to see all the versions, all the lectures over there once again. Thank you so much. Signing off. Thank you, sir.
Okay. Thank you.